Grayson Grundhoefer Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, really quick before we dive into Baylor, I have to mention something. So you were here on Tuesday. We sat at this very table I'm sitting at right now, and you went on an epic rant about your favorite team, the Indianapolis Colts, not starting Anthony Richardson. I woke up on Wednesday or Thursday morning, and they changed their mind. Would you like to admit that you strong-armed the Colts?
It definitely happened. It had to play a factor into it. It was one of the more ridiculous coaching decisions I've ever seen. And yeah, we went on a rant with it. And I woke up the next morning not thinking Shane Steichen was going to do anything. And then of course he announces, oh, Anthony Richardson's going to be the starting quarterback and will be the quarterback for the rest of the season. So thank goodness it was music to my ears.
Yeah, I thought so. Grayson, Baylor has never won in Morgantown. Is this the time that streak ends?
It certainly feels that way. Baylor has really had some struggles there. They've gotten blown out, I think, just once or twice and been in some really good games. You know, when you look at 2012 or 2022 that were really, really close. Even, when Jim Grove was at Baylor, that game was really close in 2016. So they've had moments. They just haven't been able to finish. And so I think going into this game, these are two teams that I think both feel pretty good about themselves. But I think in some regards, West Virginia is just kind of, it just feels like they're kind of just getting by on a schedule type thing. You know, playing Arizona, playing against Cincinnati. You know, Cincinnati's fine, but, there's a chance neither of those teams end up being bowl teams. And so it's just a matter of, how impressive were those wins? And then you go back and look at, the stats. I think they played well against Arizona, but against Cincinnati, it felt more like Cincinnati gave West Virginia the game than West Virginia took that game. And then you look at the Baylor side of things. This is a team that is riding really high right now. This is the number one scoring offense in the nation over the last month. They also are number one in yards over the last month as well. This is literally one of, if not the best offense in the country currently. Or at least they have a potential claim to that based on the numbers. And so I think that makes it really fascinating because it feels like West Virginia's defense, they made some changes, but it feels like they haven't been good all year. And then you look at Baylor and it's like they're just kind of rolling right now. So it feels like a battle of, strength versus weakness, and that it should be a situation that Baylor can definitely attack, which gives me some confidence that Baylor's going to go in there and finally get it done.
What do you think has been the spark in the running game? That it is not just, I thought initially it might have just been a one-off because they had a great matchup, but it's been several games in a row now that they are consistently running the ball well.
Part of it is matchups. The last three teams they've played have been really bad against the run, but to be clear on that, they've been bad against the run, but what Baylor has done to these last three teams is really significant, right? Oklahoma State's hemorrhaging yards on the ground, so maybe not necessarily that game, but what they did to Tech, a lot of teams have not been able to replicate. What they did to TCU, a lot of teams have not been able to replicate on the ground. So I do think there's something special that is certainly, brewing for Baylor's running attack. I think part of it is Bryson Washington developing into an older guy. We all forget he's just a redshirt freshman. He hasn't played a lot. And so he's starting to develop into that role. I think the offensive line is coming together. The addition of Sidney Fugar to the starting lineup at left tackle has been massive. And then I think, during the bye week, I think they did a great job of trying to adjust what they were doing in the run game. They did so much inside zone all the first half of the year. It felt like that was the only way they were going to run the football aside from, maybe the occasional Sora Robertson run. But since the bye week, they've added some off-tackle running. They've just been a little bit more diverse. And I think because of that, it's really opened up some things, along with improved play by everyone, including the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense, obviously not where they want it, but they're good in spots, which I think is what you need when you're a developing team, right? They have figured out how to be good in spots. The other thing that's happened is Steve Linton suspended about a month ago. Since that suspension, he has come off with a vengeance. And I think if you look at the attitude that he and Matt Jones have, it's very, very similar of blood in the water, let the sharks go eat.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you could throw Keaton Thomas into that as well. I mean, these guys are just flying to the football, and they're making a lot of plays, and that's great to see. And I think that's kind of been the story of Baylor, I think, this season, is that you see the talent, you see the flashes, you see these guys having the want to, right? But then you're seeing at times just guys not being able to make the play, right? And I think that's where they're still lacking a little bit. Against TCU, I mean, they basically had 2 stops that were taken away because of penalties by Jackie Marshall, who's one of their best defensive players. So you take away those 2 plays, and maybe Baylor has 2 more stops in that game, and maybe TCU only ends up scoring, 24, 27 points. And then you look at that way differently, right? And so it's those type of things, and the fact that they haven't been able to force turnovers, I think, is the other area, and that directly links back to just playmaking, right? Making those plays, making that extra effort to get the ball loose, or attention to detail to put yourself in the right position to get an interception. I think we're seeing, them play solid at times, but it's just the playmaking at times just does not fully happen. And I think that has impacted them quite a bit, along with just, they've still had issues in the secondary. At times they've had issues getting after the quarterback. But I think in general, this is a group that I do feel like has gotten better. It's just there's another level they need to get to that takes it from you're either extremely consistent and getting off the field a lot, or you're creating more havoc. And I don't think they've gotten to either of those quite yet.
Grayson, what is the key for them should Garrett Greene, which it looks like he's going to start, what is the key for them with Garrett Greene? Because running quarterbacks have given them headaches in the past, including Garrett Greene.
Right, and I think it's interesting because Baylor hasn't faced a lot of mobile quarterbacks this year. Mm-hmm. It's kind of been a lot of pocket passers. Obviously, Jake Retzlaff is a pretty good athlete, but I don't think he's quite the runner that Garrett Greene is. And now you look at Baylor's schedule going forward, and they got 3 straight really good running quarterbacks. And so they're going to have to adapt their strategy a little bit. And I think that's going to be a focal point, trying to take away his legs, making sure he doesn't kill them in the run game when they have extra blockers in to, block for him, trying to make the math add up, as Dave Aranda said this week. And if they can do that, I think they're in a good spot. And then the second area is not allowing explosive plays. Garrett Greene was phenomenal on explosive plays over 20-plus yards last year, had 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions a season ago. You fast forward to this year, he's got 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions on throws over 20-plus yards. So if the trend continues, Baylor should have success there. The problem is that's where Baylor's been attacked this season. So something has to give there, right? Either Garrett Greene is going to, turn his season around a little bit and hit on some of those explosive plays, or maybe Baylor is going to have success on those. And I think that will be pretty telling as well, as I do think that's the area that Baylor's going to try to take away and force West Virginia to be efficient and get, 3, 4, 5 first downs on drives instead of just giving up, a 50-yard play, and then now they're in the red zone.
So Dominic Richardson has, decided to transfer, and he had fallen to essentially 4th on the depth chart, and he had some injuries that knocked him back there. It wasn't, it's not like an overall performance issue on his part. It's that he had some injuries that 2 guys in Pendergrass and Washington who took their opportunities and just ran with them. Richard Reese has been a bit of a non-factor this year, which kind of surprises me because I thought that maybe in the new offense he would be more of a factor. But going forward, running back wise, do you think that depth piece not being there hurts them down the stretch, or are they okay?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought of it like that because, what if they do have an injury or something, or what if a guy misses time? Would you like to have, a guy like Dominic Richardson there? And I think my answer to that would actually be yes, for sure. I think you'd want that veteran experience. And so if they do have issues, if Pendergrass or Washington deal with something over the next few weeks, injury-wise, then yeah, you might have liked to have had that option. But on the flip side, I do think that having him as an option this year versus needing to keep him on the roster again next year, if that makes sense, I think the better choice is if he does go ahead and move on, if that makes sense. And so I think, you look at Baylor's depth chart next year and it's like, well, you got Bryson Washington, you got Dawson Pendergrass, you got Richard Reese, and then you got two outstanding freshmen in Caden Knighton and Michael Turner, two four-star guys who, I think are going to come in right away and make an impact immediately. And so I think that's where you kind of see the dilemma that maybe Baylor was even faced with. And I think in general, it's better for the program if, he moves on. And I think for Dominic Richardson, it's probably better that he moves on as well so he can, maintain his eligibility and go play somewhere in his final collegiate season.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, great stuff. We'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.